move that pushes the idea that criminals are victims, New York City wants to make it so that landlords have to house criminals in their units. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and once again, it's going over the fact that places like New York, the more progressive, anti-landlord places want to make it so landlords, we can't do tenant screening, okay? And what they're going after in particular is the background checks. They say that, landlords are weeding out good tenants who just happen to have criminal convictions, right? And they always use some silly example like, somebody who 20 years ago was convicted of one marijuana possession conviction. And you know what? That might be true, right? But simply put, landlords should have the discretion to decide who lives in their units without the government being involved. That's what I've always believed. I don't think the government should ever be trying to set who is living inside a private property owner's unit. Okay, so the laws that they're proposing, they would make it so that, hey, landlords couldn't even see felony convictions, recent felony convictions. Imagine you have a tenant or a tenant applicant who applies to live in your place, right? And this person has a conviction for, some extremely serious felony, something where somebody got hurt and it was done on purpose. Well, the landlord wouldn't be able to see that. And that means that this person could be put inside the unit and, terrorize the landlord, terrorize the other tenants, cause all sorts of problems, right? This is one of our strongest tools we use to make sure that we don't have garbage tenants within our units. But they say, it's not fair. It's not fair. Well, you know what? We need to stop worrying so much about what these criminals are facing and start worrying more about what the non-criminals are facing, okay? And non-criminal tenants at least, don't want to live next to a bunch of people with felony convictions. At least I don't think they do. Now, obviously, in certain forms of housing, super low income housing, well, it's inevitable, okay? That's where a lot of the, former convicts, etc., have ended up because, simply put, that those are the only places that will accept them. And that's better than nothing. But they think, well, you know what? There's too many people, and this is adding to homelessness. Well, if you want these people to be housed, you're going to have to basically pony up the money. Give us some kind of assurance, security deposit or something to say, hey, if this person starts causing trouble, we're not going to end up stuck with them because of all the super strong, super strict eviction protections that cover all tenants within the city. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. Do you think that it's a good idea to ban landlords from being able to do tenant background checks, okay? And specifically, checking criminal history. Now, obviously, there's places out there that want to prevent us from being able to check eviction and credit history as well. But in this, story I'm going to be covering today, it's all about the criminal, okay? So anyway, let's get into this story. This story is coming from the New York Post, and it says, New York City landlords and residents deserve background checks for would-be tenants. And it's an opinion piece, and I happen to agree with most of what this person is saying. So let's get into it. There is a growing trend of treating criminals as a new protected class. Common sense New Yorkers need to reject this idea before it's too late. At a city council hearing on Intro 0632, which would prohibit background checks by landlords on potential tenants, advocates and my fellow council members cast criminals who've been convicted by a jury of their peers and spent time in prison as victims. And they use the language of the civil rights movement to describe the challenge ex-cons have in finding an apartment in New York City. If this city is to come back from rising crime, inflation, and deteriorating quality of life, we need to snap back to reality. And I 100% agree, okay? Now, they've already passed all sorts of like bail reform laws, etc., that have turned like jails into a revolving door where basically a person gets arrested for like, petty theft and they immediately bond out. They didn't have to pay any sort of bond, okay? They immediately just get right back out of jail and they go and they victimize more people. So, yeah, there's no punishment for a lot of these crimes, and that is what is causing crime to go up. So yeah, now we're going around and we're saying, hey, we want to make it even easier for these people to get housing. We want to make, like these people are, victims in some way when they are actually the victimizers. They're the ones who are hurting the other residents of the city. And you know what? These laws, they're ridiculous. They don't need this sort of thing happening. In the overwhelming majority of cases, an individual went to prison because he or she chose wrong over right. Too many council members and advocates have bought into the notion that systematic racism, or whatever term people use for society, causes crime and high incarceration rates. False. Committing a crime and having a criminal history is a result of bad choices. We can discuss the corrosive effects of broken families, poverty, and substance abuse, but if someone has his mental faculties and commits a crime, he is ultimately responsible for the consequences. Yeah, and a lot of the pushing for this stuff is taking away people's personal responsibility for their own actions. Okay, so we're talking about saying, oh well, I only committed crime because I had a bad upbringing. It doesn't matter. Okay, you did it. You decided to do it. You need to face the consequences of your actions. Period. Okay, there is no excuse whatsoever that justifies a lot of these crimes that are happening. None. The only thing that we know is that as long as we allow these people to make excuses, as long as we allow them to treat them like victims, they're going to continue to victimize the rest of us, the non-criminals who just want to live our lives. And I'm not cool with that. This argument that criminals are victims is part of a broader effort to distort reality, which often starts with changing the meaning of words. Progressives can no longer bring themselves to say ex-con. Even ex-offender is too harsh. Now the correct terminology is justice involved. Following this twisted logic, running a background check as part of an assessment of who will live on your property is no longer prudent. It's discrimination, a word typically reserved for racists and bigots. The far left now frames most arguments in moral absolutist terms, leaving no room for compromise. You either support its policies or you support discrimination and whichever ism is in vogue. The people that are hurt the most by them not enforcing the laws, by them allowing criminals to run rampant, are the groups that have to live around those people. So as a black man, if I live in a black neighborhood and they just keep returning those criminals, they don't ever sentence them because they feel bad, well, guess what? I become the victim of the crime. I become the victim of the crime. My family becomes the victim of the crime. And the only thing we want is for those people to be locked up. Okay? I want them to be in prison. I don't want them victimizing my family, threatening my family, making us feel unsafe. Okay, but they have the false assumption, and this is a stupid assumption in my opinion, that all black people are being victimized by the police, and therefore, we all want, just basically them to open up the prisons and let everybody go. That is so dumb. Okay, I do not agree with that. There might be some who do agree with that, but you know what? I'm not one of them. And a lot of the hardworking people who are non-criminals that I know, they're not part of that group either. Even if you believe crime has some root cause that has nothing to do with individual choice, Intro 0632 is still a bad bill. The law, as written, can't be enforced and will allow for frivolous lawsuits against landlords. Joanne Camuff Ward, Deputy Commissioner for Policy and External Affairs at the Commission on Human Rights, testified that it's not possible to say definitively if someone did not get an apartment due to a felonious background. Evidence is based on people's feelings, anecdotes, and studies from advocates about searching for an apartment in New York City. Well, I understand what they're saying, right? The truth is that, yeah, a lot of landlords are going to reject you if you have a felony conviction. A lot of landlords are going to reject people with multiple serious misdemeanor convictions because they are hedging their bets. This is a very, very expensive investment. Here in Omaha, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. In New York City, we're talking about millions of dollars of investment. And you're just going to, just throw all of that investment away so that you could take a chance on somebody who might not end up being a good tenant. I know I wouldn't. Okay, that's a dumb thing to do. So yeah, the city's trying to get involved. They're trying to force landlords to do something they don't want to do. They're trying to treat criminals as though they are victims. And overall, this is going to be bad for landlords. It's going to be bad for tenants, and it's going to be bad for the city in general.